Yo guys, welcome back. We are back today with another commentary for the Summer of Arcade Special 2023. This time we are going to be going over Metal Slug 5. A note about today's recording, you're going to hear some goofy stuff in the background. I have a lot going on. I've got a fairly busy household today, so you're going to hear stuff moving around. You're possibly going to hear a dog barking, and it's so friggin' hot today that I have a fan on, so that may be picked up by the recording as well. But that's okay. Welcome in, we'll go ahead and get through it. Let's get down to brass tacks. So Metal Slug 5 was the first Metal Slug underneath the SNK Playmore label, officially. SNK went through a lot of owners in its lifetime, and most of them didn't really do SNK justice at all. And so the quality of the game didn't really dip, like they've always had kind of quality titles and stuff and never had really an issue with it. It's always been really nice in that regard, but it would eventually lead to SNK's demise. They barely bounced back with it. I'm glad to see that they're still around. So recording Metal Slug 5 was a little bit of a challenge. When I had picked up this cartridge and stuff, I didn't even know that it was Metal Slug 5. It was literally an unlabeled cart that was like solid black, and it was covered in dust, and I was just kind of going through the box after I picked it up, and I said, God, what the hell is this? And then when I went to go and plug it into the dongle to actually read it to see what it was, it didn't even want to read correctly. So I was actually really shocked that I was able to do Metal Slug 5 at all. I was actually expecting it to fail a fair bit. Metal Slug 5 is a lot like Metal Slug 1. It's a little bit on the shorter side, clocking in around 45 minutes. I'm sure that it's even shorter if I could have stopped dying for more than 5 seconds. But it's very much so a contained and playable experience. It's fun to play. It does a lot of new things. It recycles a lot of older things, as I would expect SNK to do. But the core thing with the game is that weapon values have been adjusted and stuff. Difficulty has been adjusted. Like SNK at the time was continuing the trend of focusing on creating a more playable experience. It still suffers from the dated controls that they were using back then, and a lot of these games are still pretty old. Second thumbstick wasn't really a thing, especially on arcades and stuff. So it still, even though it's a new SNK title, even though it's a new Metal Slug, it still suffers from a lot of these same old issues. And it can lead to some points of aggravation and stuff. But there's enough new stuff to actually keep the game running, very well, and still keep it entertaining and stuff. And I think around this time, SNK was fully aware of the shortcomings of the platform that they were going and releasing these on. I noticed a lot of the effects and stuff had been tapered back a fair bit to compensate for the limited hardware of their machines at the time and such, because again, souped up Sega Genesis. So I noticed that as the games go on, they're like less and less flashy. Like they have more detail, but they're a lot less animated in some areas, and I can tell they were trying to balance it out a little bit. So Metal Slug 5 almost didn't happen. It was a pain to record. I went ahead and when I had gotten the cartridge, I plugged it into the dongle and plugged it into the PC to pull a ROM off so I could go and port it over to an emulator and then get it ready for filming and stuff. So I was just kind of sitting there and he just didn't want to read. And it was filthy from like top to bottom. Like it had been sitting in that box for so long, I think. And it didn't look damaged, it just looked dirty. So I had to literally go get some IPA and Q-tips, cotton swabs, all that shit. And I had to go and just thoroughly clean it. Like really just thoroughly clean it and stuff. And it was just kind of a mess. I mean, it was just black grime on black grime on black grime, and I had to clean it 4 separate times just to get it to a point where the cotton was coming back clean. So eventually it did read, and as always, SNK had like next to no copy protection on any of it. It was really easy to just pull off. I got it loaded in, and then from there it wasn't hard to really go and try to film the game. So the game itself, it's not terribly difficult or anything like that. It's one of the easier Metal Slugs, I think, out of the entire franchise. As always, it's super fun to play, and it has the stereotypical tank bosses and everything else that you would expect out of every Metal Slug title. A lot of the patterns for a lot of the ammunition that's being shot around are more contained in this one, and yet, as you can see here, I still managed to die to it pretty easily. So with Metal Slug 5, it didn't really record well. on the first outing. So what I've been doing with a lot of these older games, and this has been largely excluded from using, my apologies, this has been largely excluded from the commentary version, but what I would do is I would go and I'd film the game, and then from there it would be filmed in the original aspect ratio, because when I load them up in emulators, I don't go and stretch them or anything like that. They're still presented in 4:3 because I wanted to keep the original aspect ratio. When you start stretching it and stuff, things look kind of weird, especially when you're going and using various filters and everything else. It just really does not stretch well. And so what I would have a tendency to do is these films have to run through a couple different editors to actually be functional to get them where I need to be. First, they're recorded on AZ Recorder and stuff, the Android version. And since I have a 4 gig limit, I have a tendency to try to beat these as fast as possible. That's why you see me bum rush them as much as you do. And then from there, I have X Recorder that literally goes and handles a little bit of the editing and stuff. And so X Recorder is literally kind of a what I would call a night and day app. And that's because it makes editing so easy that I can just jump in, do whatever the hell I want to do, and then do it fast on top of it. It's kind of like, it really reminds me of a version of iMovie for Android, essentially. So if I go and I load up the original footage, and I say to myself, hey, I really don't want black bars on the side, I just kind of want to present it in the original aspect ratio, and, you know, if somebody goes to watch it, I want it to kind of like take up the whole screen and be presented properly. Sometimes when I upload videos in 4:3, YouTube's kind of smart about it, cuts the black bars off the side, and then presents it in the original aspect ratio. Other times, YouTube is not really that intelligent about it, and then they keep the black bars on the side and then try to go and present it in 16:9. So I had gotten to a point where I was looking at a lot of these old games. I would look at a lot of my old long plays, and I would be like, okay, you know, I like these long plays, they look good, but I really want to get rid of the black bars on the side. How do I do this? And with iMovie, it's like a really huge pain in the ass. So when I was going and using X Recorder and stuff, it has a fully featured editing suite. And so there's an option in there. There's a couple of them. You can trim it, you can add filters, you can add effects, you can add text, music, whatever the hell I want, more or less. But there's also an additional option in there where it allows me to go and automatically set it to what aspect ratio I want. So this would speed up editing time, because the way that I would go about doing it is I would record it, I would find it on the Odin, I would open it up in X Recorder, and then from there I would quite literally go trim it to get rid of, so when I run all these on emulators, I have this really obnoxious green and white flashing screen because it's loading it in an emulator and stuff, and it, you know, some things just don't really work right. With the arcade games, all the SNK games do it, so I don't want, a lot of people when they go and they record these games, I notice, they're like, oh, we want to keep the, you know, the green and the white flashing screen in the recording. I don't really like that because I view it as kind of messy. So what I do is I trim it. I take the clip, and with the trimmer, it allows me to shave it down by the millisecond, so I slowly, it's presented as a knob, right? And I slowly but surely roll that knob over until it just stops doing it, and it gives a much cleaner presentation. I cut it right there, I discard all the bloat, and then, so the first thing you see in a lot of these recordings is quite literally just SNK or SNK Play More or whatever the hell. Some of them don't even have the flashing screen, and then some of them don't even load the SNK splash screen very well or at all. So what I do is, for the sake of keeping it clean, and because I like to have clean recordings, what I do is I typically trim off whatever is not working right. The game obviously works right, you know, so the game isn't really impacted by it, but a lot of the splash screens don't really work correctly. So I go and I trim it off, and a lot of the time the recording starts from that point. And since I can shave it down by the millisecond, I can cut it off right where it ends, and so it doesn't take away from the main recording itself, and that's really nice. So a lot of the other things that I do is, like, after that's done, I'll go, I won't like render it for the first time, I'll go ahead and I'll check the audio levels. If I feel that the recording is too dim, I'll go ahead and raise the audio levels a little bit because I know that it kind of sucks for people that are on phones, especially if their phones have weaker speakers and they have a fairly silent recording. They'll have to turn their phone all the way up, and then they still won't really be able to hear it, so a little bit of amplification for the audio is in order. The videos don't largely get color correction, like at all. I prefer to kind of present them as is. However, they do go through various tweaks and tuning, cleaning up the image quality a little bit. You know, so I do a lot of signal and artifact reduction, and it cleans it up. And you know, I don't really like artifacts and stuff. There is still some artifacting on these games because that's just how the games were back then. Like, they would artifact if there's like a ton of stuff going on, and it's not something I'm able to get around per se. Like, I tried it on Mac, I tried it on the O, and they just artifact sometimes. And so I go and I clean it up to the best of my ability, and then of course everything is recorded in 720p 60 frames. So the final step before I actually go and start rendering it is I've started going and adjusting for aspect ratio. I would look at it and I wouldn't really be satisfied with the black bars on the side. I would kind of just sit there and say, you know, this really just isn't that great. And the more I would stare at it, the more I would say to myself, you know, this is pretty fucking ugly. And while I do adore my older recordings and stuff, and I did enjoy doing them, I really wish that I would have, back then at least, had the ability to chop the black boxes off the side. And so I didn't back then because iMovie doesn't really do it well, and everything was recorded on iMovie, you know. And so it was a little bit of a learning experience. So the final step is I go into aspect ratio, and they have literally a bunch of custom sizes that you can go and pick from. They also have a tool that you can drag and drop until it just fits the screen. But the cool thing about it is I can go and I can take that recording, and I can just go, click 4:3, it trims it and crops it perfectly every single time. And then from there, the only thing I have to do is render. And so, you know, the rendering setting pop up, and it's like 720p to keep it watchable, 60 frames because I like it, I like it smooth. And then I go and I render it, and they normally render really fast. My handheld actually renders faster than my Macintosh, but to be fair, my Macintosh is really old. It's like from 2012. So this is basically how we go and we get videos out the door, more or less, you know, when I go and I work on them. And then the only thing that I don't really care for about it, and this has been a learning curve with being on the Android platform, is Xrecorder doesn't really go and add audio well. Like, it has an option for it. The problem is it doesn't really do it well, so there's a lot of challenges. And Metal Slug 5 pretty much had every issue in the book. So when it was being exported and stuff, like, it was playing great on Android. But for some reason, when I went to go and import it to iMovie to add audio and everything else, it wasn't really doing it well. And so I had to go and I would look at it, and it would be functioning at 60 frames on Android if I went and I checked it and, you know, looked at the video stats for it. But I noticed on iMovie, it would just record it in 720p but not 60 frames. And so I would go and I would look at it, and a lot of the time I would have to open it up in something like QuickTime or LMedia Media Player to actually go right-click on it and then, you know, look up the stats, and for some reason it would literally go and say that it wasn't a straight 60. It'd be like 59.6 or 59.9. It was really some oddball stuff, and apparently it is a problem on the Mac platform sometimes. And so what I would have to do is a lot of, if I was struggling with the recording, what I would do is I would do a black screen, a split-second long black screen that is deliberately designed to function in 720p 60 frames. And so what this does in iMovie is, since it recognizes that first piece of content as 720p 60 frames, when it renders, it defers to that first piece of content. And then it, using that first piece of content, it uses it to govern how the rest of the content is rendered. So if I wasn't able to go and get it to recognize 60 frames right off the bat for the content due to the platform, I could literally go make a split-second long black screen with nothing on it, and I could literally go and force 60 frames, 720p. So it was really just one of those interesting things, and it's one of the tricks that I'm more grateful to have. Like, I feel like iMovie is a good app to start learning video editing on. It's really easy to pick up and learn. But the problem is it's lacking a lot of options. And that's not really that great. I mean, it's good if you want to pick it up and start learning, but it's not good if you want to do more advanced things. And this is why I kind of struggle with it a little bit. So the entire time that I was porting the SNK Arcade Summer Special over to iMovie to add commentary, there would be like these oddball things that would pop up. I would have to adjust for the I would have to adjust for 720p 60 frames to get it to function correctly. Another thing that was really weird is automatically by default iMovie likes to go and it likes to stretch the entire picture to fill up the entire screen. And what this would end up doing is having overscan on the top and on the sides, so you would just really go and kind of struggle with it, I think. And so as an end result of that, you know, I would have to go in, look at the crop settings and stuff, and then turn around and try to fix it. You know, it would try to apply the Ken Burns effect a lot of the time, or sometimes the setting stretch to fill would be enabled, and that would create a shit ton of overscan. Like the high score and my score would just run up straight up off the top, and then, you know, a lot of the, like the extra life and stuff that you see on the side, it would run off the sides, and I just didn't really care for that too much. It wasn't really that great, you know, so I would have to go in, manually adjust, and then tweak it, tune it, and everything else, and it was just kind of a headache. Like, I like iMovie for its simplicity, but I hate its lack of options. And I really hate its user interface at times. It's really not that great. So with a lot of these arcade commentaries that I've been doing, I would have to go back, and I know last night I had to go back and re-render a bunch of them because I didn't know that it was automatically cropping it. I was actually kind of tired while going and rendering, so what would happen essentially is I would go render it thinking that it was okay, and once I actually got around to watching them again, I would notice the overscan. I'd be like, why the hell is my extra life counter essentially missing? Why the hell is the high score running off the top, you know? It was really weird, and so even though I was able to do it flawlessly on Android for the most part, going and adding commentary on Mac was a fucking nightmare in every sense of the term, you know? Like, I would go and I would be like, okay, you know, this is going to be an issue, and it's mainly because since they try to streamline so much of iMovie, like they try to add a bunch of additional effects. And even when I'm going and making raw video, you know, starting up a fresh recording and stuff and developing it exclusively on Mac, you know, it still has these issues. Like, it'll try to add a bunch of effects and stuff and everything else. So what winds up happening is it'll be like, oh, we hear you want the Ken Burns effect, or we want this, and we want that, and you know, the thing is I kind of wish that iMovie would allow me to start with a fresh slate and just let me add the shit that I want to add as I go. It would be a great way of doing things. I understand that they want to help you make your video look and function in a very cool fashion. I get it. But as I continue video production, I realize I'm developing a very specific set of tastes. I have very specific wants out of what I'm trying to do, and I think that when you go and you use, like, Apple applications and stuff, a lot of the time they try to make the judgment for you and be like, okay, well, we think that you're going to like this, so we're automatically going to enable it. So when I was going and doing the commentaries for all of these SNK games so far, it would be like, oh, we're going to go ahead and make the picture zoomed in instead of be in 4:3, and then, you know, we're going to govern it as 59.9 frames and only allow you to render in 30, and so I'd have to compensate for that. And then another thing that was kind of weird is they were trying to do audio flattening for a while, so basically they have this incredibly annoying setting where what winds up happening is you go and naturally as you record you're going to have peaks. You know, you're going to have some sections of your audio that are louder than others. You know, maybe I'm excited and yelling about something, naturally it's going to be a lot louder than the rest of the recording. Well, when I go and I import that audio sample, you know, it shows me how high all the peaks and stuff are, and so by default they have this annoying setting set up where it levels out the audio. It effectively kills all of the peaks and stuff by flattening everything, and it's really obnoxious. And so I would have to go in and I would listen to the audio sample to see if it actually made it better, you know, because like sometimes it does a good job with it, but most of the time it doesn't. And a lot of the time, it would make the audio so soft, almost to the point of being fuzzy, that I couldn't stand it. So I was like, you know what? I would much rather go and just adjust the audio myself. And so I find that the longer I do video production, the more I learn and the more I evolve and change and all that stuff. Basically, I'm learning that I'm outgrowing a lot of Apple's software. Like, I kind of sat there and I was looking at it, and I said to myself, how the hell can a $15 app on Android do it better than what Apple is able to produce? You know, like, Apple considers a lot of their applications to be professional and stuff. They even plagiarized iMovie at one point as like professional app for like a beginner and stuff, but I find that I'm outgrowing it relatively quickly, and I'm looking at other options. I have been looking at other options for a while now. And so it's really just kind of strange because I like the ease of use with iMovie, but I do not like the lack of customization. I do not like the all the stuff they try to weasel in there and stuff. So the big challenge with going and shooting all of these commentaries is quite literally me just kind of sitting here going, oh my god, they broke something, how do I fix this? And it's kind of awful in that regard, you know, because I just kind of want to go in there, make my edits and stuff, do what I want to do, and just kind of go from there. And Apple tries to have a lot of control over the experience and stuff. So with X Recorder, I can literally go in, do what I want to do, prop the ends, obviously, you know, by the millisecond, go fix the aspect ratio, force, you know, 720p, 60 frames. That way it keeps everything really, really smooth, and, you know, just go and render it like that. Like when I would go and start rendering these on a cheap-ass handheld, well, actually the Odin wasn't really that cheap, it was kind of in that higher-end range of things. But point being is, when I can go and have basically a very cheap applet, right, go and outdo a piece of what is perceived to be high-end software by the company, and it does it better, I personally think that something is wrong there. And so a lot of people were like, well, if you want more customization, you know, you should go and get Final Cut. And I thought about it. I eventually wound up looking at it, and I was like, nah, this really isn't that great, because it does the same thing that iMovie does a little bit. It does have customization, but with Final Cut Pro, I'm kind of looking at it, and I do enjoy the tool set and stuff, but I was looking at it, I was like, why is it trying to make all these choices right off the bat? Why is it constantly suggesting to me what I should and shouldn't be doing? And I think the further I get down this track of going and working on things, the more I realize that I just kind of want a blank slate. You know, I don't want... It's like going to your garage, right? And going to the wall that has all your tools on it. And you go and you're like, okay, I got a busted valve on my toilet. We're going to go ahead and fix this. And then as you go and grab the wrench, you have a very annoying pop-up tooltip that's like, we know that you want to go and do like a repair with a wrench, but have you considered going and not just replacing the valve, but adding a bidet? I mean, it's really obnoxious how much it tries to squeeze in there. And I don't really care for it too much. You know, I just kind of want to go and have a blank slate to go and do work on. I think the one editor that I've been looking at kind of hardcore a little bit, that I'm thinking about transitioning over to, is DaVinci Resolve. It looks really good, and it doesn't do any of this annoying shit. It just says, hey, here's a blank slate, go ahead and try it out. I'm in the process of playing around with it a little bit. You know, I do like it. I don't have as much time as I wish I did to actually go and learn on it, but so far what I have learned, I do like a fair bit. Sony Vegas is another good one. You know, their editor is really, really nice, but it's very, very heavy on the machine and stuff, and so I would probably have to look at upgrading the computer at some point. Another thing that I have greatly considered is moving off of the Mac platform in general. And the more that I go and do these video recordings and edits and everything else, the more I realize that the Mac ecosystem is incredibly limiting. Like, for example, on a Windows-based machine, what I can actually do is go and download what I want, when I want, how I want. If it's an older map, if it is an older app, I can throw it in compatibility mode to get it to run. The problem that I currently have with the Mac ecosystem while trying to do editing is I'm greatly restricted on what I can do, what I can't do. There's a lot of issues going and trying to just get recordings on Mac running in general. And so there was like a really huge kind of list of stuff that I had to go and overcome. And like, for example, when I would go and record on the Mac, I would just go and record the screen using QuickTime. But for some reason, Apple has this really weird thing where they're like, well, we know that you want to record the screen, but we're not going to allow you to record any audio. And I thought it was really weird, and I said, man, this has got to be like a bug or something. No, it was intentional. I had to look it up, and Apple was like, well, we value your privacy. And it's like, if I'm going and doing the screen recording and stuff, obviously I'm not worried about privacy at that point. So there was a lot of workarounds that I had to employ to go and get audio to record correctly, and even then it didn't record correctly the first shot around. I had to tweak it and tune it and tweak it and tune it, because a lot of the time the audio would sound bit crushed, and so I actually managed to get help from somebody who was like, hey, listen, this is the range that you want to go and focus in if you're routing all of your audio through a television, yada yada, and he was actually really kind about it. Blake was a class act. And so I literally had to go and use a sound applet to go and capture internalized audio, and then I had to go and tweak it and tune it excessively, and it was really obnoxious. So I literally had to go, and the applet's called Soundflower, and what it does is it allows you to bust everything up into multiple sound channels, and then using the MIDI, the MIDI toolbox app, you can go and set up custom audio on your Mac. That way, whenever you go and decide you want to do a recording, you can go and just be like, oh, I'm interested in doing a recording. You go up to audio, you click it, you go down to the channel you want to capture, click it, and then you start recording and pop your uncle. And so Soundflower is an old applet. It really is. Like, it hasn't been worked on in so long. And like I'm incredibly grateful for it because it made a lot of my long plays happen. Like, if it wasn't for Soundflower, I would not be going, and those initial long plays would have never happened. So, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that if I was going and screen recording on a PC, I could just screen record, not have to really worry about whether or not the audio is blocked out. On a Mac, I had to go. It didn't even come stock. I had to use a bunch of stuff just to get it to function correctly, and then from there I literally had to go tweak it and tune it so it didn't sound bit crushed. And for a company that constantly says, oh, it just it just works as intended, I find that nothing really works as intended. I love the interface for Mac. I do love a lot of things about it, but when it comes to doing just really basic things, sometimes I struggle with it. And so it's really just kind of oddball. So for a while I've been considering going back to Windows, but to be fair, Windows isn't really doing that great either. I kind of feel like I'm picking the lesser of two evils with it, and that's not really that awesome. So it's really just kind of one of those things, I think. And so a lot of these recordings are like labors of love because I feel like I have to compensate for the platform I'm on. Now, some things the Mac does great, like it does do rendering amazingly. A Mac Mini is an amazing render box, but there are various issues with it. I have considered upgrading the Mac to like a newer model, but the problem that I have with that is currently I'm running macOS Catalina. And it was my first macOS distro in quite some time, because I, believe it or not, I actually grew up on Mac. It was like an old iMac when I was a child. And then before that, it was like an old Apple II. And then from there, I pretty much got on MS-DOS, stayed on MS-DOS, and then Windows 95, 98, ME, things like that, all the way up to Windows 10. And so when I came back to the ecosystem, it was because I was going and looking for a solid workhorse. And I actually do have very fond memories of using Mac computers. But what really is breaking it for me is I use a lot of software that is not official software. They're just older DMG packages that I literally have to go and use because the OS itself just kind of struggles with some basic functionality. And the problem that I have with this is not so much the fact that I'm using unsigned packages, although that's perfectly okay. It's the problem that Apple had announced that starting with newer OSs that they were going to make it to where you couldn't install unsigned software. Well, the thing is all these videos are happening because I'm using a ton of unsigned software. A lot of the editing is unsigned software that is ran through iMovie. A lot of the sound capture, well, all of the sound capture is being ran via Soundflower, unsigned software. If I was to go and upgrade to a newer model, I would lose all this functionality. And since they're still doubling down on the whole, we have to protect the user thing, I lose all of those options. So when I go and I look at this, I kind of say to myself, yeah, I like a lot of the interface, I like a lot of the simplicity, but from a raw work standpoint, I'm not really going to be getting very far in the future with this. You know, like it took me 5 months to learn how to go and operate everything editing-wise on a Mac correctly. On an Android tablet that is running Android 10, I was able to literally go and do the same damn thing in about 50 minutes. You know, the software just seems a lot more thoughtful. The only reason that I continue to produce on this Mac is simply because I realized that adding audio on the Android side of things is a nightmare. And so Mac does it a little bit better, only because I have not found a suitable editing app that could handle it on Android, more or less. So with a lot of these videos, there's like a lot of compensating. I don't really compensate so much from the Android side of things. The initial run for the Blind Gamers Arcade literally was all like filmed and edited and produced on the Odin, and it looks good. I went back and I watched it and I said, oh man, this is actually really nice for a bunch of free and cheap apps. It's not bad, but you know, they don't have the ability to do commentary videos, and that's really where it kind of bottlenecked for me. I would go and I would check out other editors and stuff, and they were nice, but a lot of them would be buggy. A lot of the time they wouldn't function right. Like, I understand that they were like free apps and stuff. That's cool, but I think I'd rather have like a paid app that I can literally go and just you know, buy it and have solid functionality. I don't mind buying my software. And then we had some other apps where they were buggy, but they would want to have you subscribe essentially to it. And so I release videos in short stints, and a lot of these apps were like, you know, for like $20 a month, you can go and have access to this app. And if I'm going to be going and paying a subscription fee, I would at least like it to work correctly. I'm running a pretty new phone. It's like only 2 years old, and it can pretty much run everything. You know, there's not a whole hell of a lot that it can't do still. And for some reason, like a lot of these apps, they would want me to subscribe, but they would barely be functional. So in many ways, I think this is one of the challenges of working across various platforms and stuff. And I kind of sit down and I look at it and I say to myself, you know, it's challenging, but it's worth it. But the more I get, the further I get down this pipeline, essentially, the more I go back to looking at Windows, because Windows has a wider wealth of applications. I can use what I want when I want. If a software, if a piece of software is not working correctly, a lot of the times I can find the solution to make it run well online. It's not hard to tweak and tune. You know, with Mac, they don't really like having you have control over your own files very much, so it's hard to tweak and tune anything. You know, like, it's just really kind of a mess, and so it's really screwed up because a lot of the time, you know, like, I have fond memories of going and editing on my Mac, and it actually kind of pisses me off because I don't really see myself having a future with it. You know, like, I spend more time struggling with it than anything, and that's really just not that great. So a lot of these videos, it's like, okay, how do we make it happen? You know, how do we do it better? How do we make it function right? How do we do this? How do we do that? In many ways, I'm actually really glad for the grief that it has given me, because it's been like a learning experience. Essentially, I can sit down and I can go and look at it and learn from it and be like, oh, okay, you know, this is how I fix this, this is how I make this work. I do enjoy learning things, but the thing is sometimes when you go and you render videos, you don't want to spend like 8 or 9 hours looking for a fix. Sometimes you don't have 8 or 9 hours to go and look for a fix. Sometimes you just need things to work right first shot around. That way you could go get down to work, you can go get the videos rendered and move on with your day. I don't mind learning, but I do want periods of stability as well. So it's been kind of one of those things, I think. You know, it's one of many challenges that I've had while going and learning how to render videos and stuff. In my opinion, my slightly expensive Android handheld device literally does most things better than my Mac. The only reason that I continue to use the Mac is for some things it is slightly higher quality, and then commentary videos, of course. But outside of that, I find that my Android handheld is way more customizable. I have way more options at my disposal. If I'm going and wanting to make something in particular, like something very specific, I can go and do it. I have the freedom to go and do that. And with Apple, I don't. Like, they're trying so hard to emphasize on user satisfaction and ease of use and everything that they literally go and they sacrifice customization for it. It almost feels like they're trying to dumb it down so much that they think that their user base cannot learn anything. And that's one of the joys of like picking up a new hobby and stuff, is learning how to do new things. You know, learning about various bit rates and stuff, learning about various settings, learning how to properly trim videos, learning how to, you know, do aspect ratio and everything else, learning how to go and do a proper frame rate. You know, all of these things are important. You know, like, it's good to go and make software accessible, but it's bad to think that your user base does not have the capacity to learn anything. You know, so this is why settings like this are important, you know, and it's why I enjoy a lot of my editing time on the Android handheld. You know, I mean, it's not always ideal. I do have a recording limit of 4 gigs and stuff. But the thing is I can compensate for that. I can literally go and tweak and tune all of my settings to meet that 4 gig size limit without too much impact on the quality. And then if I want it in 60 frames, I got it. If I want it in a specific resolution, I got it. If I want to trim it in a certain aspect ratio, I got it. And it's not hard to do. That's what makes it great. All the settings are there, and they're like ready to be used. They're easily labeled. You know, it's just a much nicer experience. And so when I go back and I look at iMovie and stuff, I kind of just sit there and I say, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm having to deal with this crap again. And it's awful because my video editing journey started off on Apple software. And yet it was really disappointing exactly how fast I outgrew it. And it gives me a lot of food for thought, and I thought about it a lot while going and filming, you know, Metal Slug 5 and stuff. Metal Slug 5 was really difficult to film. It had frame pacing issues. Sometimes when I would run it through iMovie, it would have weird-ass artifacting. Like, there was just all kinds of stuff that I had to go and deal with, and it was just really, really obnoxious. You know, on other platforms, it would have been a lot more easy to go and remedy these issues. But for some reason, since software on the Mac platform is literally so stripped down, it makes it difficult to do base grade things. And so in many ways, Metal Slug 5 was kind of my trouble child. When I had recorded it and ran it through the first time to render it, it didn't want to do audio correctly at all. Like, the audio levels were all screwed up. I had to go in, fix that. And then when I had to go and do various other things, like I wanted to go and see what was causing the artifacting, I would run it through because it would supposedly, you know, fix that if I ran it through a second time. It wouldn't really fix it. Eventually I had gotten to the point where I had made a base grade copy of this particular commentary, I used iMovie long enough to shackle the audio to the video, and then from there I had it ported over to my cell phone because it also has editing software on it, the same stuff I use on the Odin. And I literally used a $15 Android app to go and fix all of its discrepancies. And I just think that in many ways, you know, like Apple turns around and they're like, oh, this is a premium product. All of our software is premium, but it fails basic things. And so it was really weird. Strangely enough, out of all the recordings, Metal Slug 5 is the only one that did it. So it was just really kind of oddball for me a little bit. All the other recordings, for the most part, were pretty smooth. They still had the occasional oddball issues of going, and it's like, we don't want to recognize 50 frames, that's easily fixed. Or 60 frames. And it's like, that's easily fixed. And just other things that should be functioning well just really weren't, you know, and I really just kind of loathe it a fair bit. Like, I enjoy my Mac. It's good for basic computing, but Jesus Christ, Mac OS is not for power users. Like, at all. It is just not for power users, and it's really disappointing. You know, it's almost like when you go and use, like, a Mac product, they're like, oh, well, an Apple product, sorry. They go and they're like, oh, we know what you want, it's okay, you don't have to do it, we'll do it for you. Like, the amount of dumbing down that they do with most of their stuff is just awful. And I really had lost a lot of love for it, I think. I was really damn disappointed about that. You know, I actually really like this boss. I hated the excessive amount of AoE of some attacks, but I actually really like this ending boss. I love the celestial nature of it. I noticed towards the further along the franchise got with Metal Slug and stuff, I noticed that they started going for more celestial things. Like, they started getting goofy with it ever since they debuted Aliens. And I was actually really grateful for that, because I feel that things have to evolve and stuff. So, like, with the other Metal Slugs, you know, they're like, we're gonna go ahead and introduce aliens, and we're gonna make it, you know, have a comedic effect, and we're gonna have references to pop culture movies and stuff. And then with the later games, especially X, they were like, we're gonna go for, like, celestial monsters and everything else, and, you know, we're just gonna get goofy and have fun with it. And, you know, I really appreciate how much Metal Slug has evolved over the years. It was, like I was saying in a previous video, they keep enough of the old stuff to keep it comfy and keep it familiar, but they add enough new stuff to keep it constantly entertaining, and I just respect the hell out of that immensely. So we're going to be back with another commentary for Metal Slug X, and it's just essentially Metal Slug 2 with a couple of changes and a swapped color palette and a couple of other, like, tweaks and tunes and slightly better performance. And then from there, Metal Slug will be done. We will be moving on to all the other SNK games and stuff, so for those that stuck around and hung out and listened to me ramble incoherently, I greatly appreciate it. I love your guys' time and energy. I appreciate what you guys bring into my channel. For those that comment, thank you for commenting. I don't really get to you guys as fast as I want to, but I try to do it typically within a day. I just don't check the YouTube Studio app all the time and stuff. But with that out of the way, I hope you guys are doing well. You know, I hope you guys are happy, healthy. I hope you're being treated well. And until next time, I'm out.